you're on TikTok or you're on Facebook and you see a video. Oh my goodness, here is this presidential candidate saying these horrible things. I can't believe they said these things. Is it real? Is it not? You have no idea. That's just a random video that you saw somewhere. But in an evidentiary situation, you would want to be able to testify as to what chain of custody, where did this video come from? What does the metadata show as to where the video came from?
Hello everybody, and welcome yet again to another episode of the Everything AI and Lore podcast. And today I have somebody who is in a path that I would like to tow. His name is W. Curtis Preston, and he is so many things. But let me start. He's a data entrepreneur. He's a cyber recovery expert. He combines the legal and technical expertise and helps explain the technology behind legal processes or proceedings to lawyers in languages they can explain, they can understand. And if you've been following this podcast, you know that this is one of the major reason or major focus of this podcast. So I'm super excited to have him here. Welcome, W. Curtis Preston. How are you doing?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, okay, let's start right away. So the first question I want to ask is, why and how did you combine technical and legal expertise? Why did you choose to bridge these two distinct fields?
Yeah, I don't think I made a choice. I think it was chosen for me. I am, at my heart, I am a technical person. I'm a nerd, a geek, whatever phrase you want to do, right? I've been in the IT space for over 30 years, but parallel to that, I also had a lot of involvement. Well, I'd say a lot more than the average person involvement in the legal process, right? Either participating on my own on like lawsuits that I filed for my own purposes. Acting as a pro se lawyer, right? Also having hired a lawyer, and then over time ended up becoming involved as an expert witness. So I've been deposed several times. So I've seen the legal process from many aspects. I am not legally trained. I should very much, should just say that up front. I don't think I've ever I think I took a business law class at one point, and that's the extent of my formal legal training. But I've been in and around the legal process quite a bit. And then now, as of about 6 months ago, I started working at a company where my technical expertise is, and my legal, I won't call it expertise, but my legal knowledge definitely has come together because they are a company that provides technical type services to the legal community. So it's a perfect place for me to be.
Awesome. So the next question is, your profile said that you initiated 3 legal cases and you prevailed in each. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah. The two of them were civil lawsuits, basically filed in small claims court, where I sued. One of them was I sued probably the most fun one, and the one where I involved expert witness and things like that. As I sued a transmission dealer, because when they swapped out my clutch, they didn't put the gear oil back in and basically blew up my transmission. And I sued them because they were saying that they didn't do anything wrong, right? And the amazing thing is that was all over a few $100s, and I found an expert witness that was an expert on transmissions and how they work and whatnot, and he volunteered his time to be an expert witness, and we prevailed in that case, and I got the money to basically replace my transmission. There was also there've been multiple times, and each of them were cases where I didn't have the money to pay for a lawyer, right? The lawyer was, basically paying for a lawyer would, especially if I did not prevail, that, I would end up losing more money than the whole thing in the beginning, right? So I just ended up doing it myself. And at the time I had lawyer friends as well. So I could get, unofficial legal advice from people. And I would tell them that it would always, I would say, look, I'm just going to be honest. Most of what I know about law comes from watching this television show or this movie, and I know that much of it is wrong. So, although I have watched My Cousin Vinny many times, and I've been told that that's one of the best movies that actually depict law in a somewhat realistic standpoint. But anyway, so yeah. Done that, and clearly I'm good at talking. I'm good at arguing, and in fact, many people when I was young, they assumed I was going to grow up to be a lawyer, and I just my desires just led elsewhere.
Well, but you could also pass as a lawyer, though. I mean,
well, with a lot more training, with a lot more schooling, and. But yeah, I'm definitely good at arguing. I will say that.
Wow, that's so interesting. Okay, so now in terms of the law and tech and AI, now we know AI has been buzzing for about 2 years now, right? 2022, especially when ChatGPT generative AI. So now, what are the impact or influences of AI in the legal sector now and in the future? What do you think?
Well, when I can really only comment on the area where I'm seeing, right? And this is in the area of things like discovery, electronic discovery, and also the areas of forensics, right? So, digital forensics of taking an image of a hard drive or a phone or a camera, et cetera, right? And the area where AI is sort of happening, I think, is in that phase where we have this giant pile of, I'll call it data, right? In my world, ones and zeros, right? Just a ton of files, a ton of emails, a ton of, Word documents, a ton of PDFs. And where AI right now, when you look at the tools like Relativity, where they have AI features built into them, which is a tool that my company uses, it's helping you to see if you can find those nuggets that you're looking for, because as you know, one of the hardest parts is to take that giant pile of data and turn it into a much smaller pile of possible information, and then turn that into an even smaller pile of relevant information, right? That's relevant to the case. And we do participate in that second part of it, right? And of the processing and filtering and all of that. Where we spend most of our time is in the first part, which is actually getting the data out of the systems where they currently reside. And none of these systems, well, I'll rephrase that. Almost none of these systems store the data in such a way to make that retrieval easy. And so there's, to my knowledge, I mean, there's a very small number of companies that specialize in pulling the data out like that. And I'm not aware of any that are using AI in any way to do that work, because that work is very, it's very deep and technical, and it's not really something that AI, at least at this point, can help participate in.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, so in court, tendering of evidence and with the rise of sophistication of deepfakes technology and all, what are the measures that can help avoid fake videos being tendered as evidence in courts, fake images and the likes?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will definitely say it's definitely beyond my expertise, but I can conjecture, right? And that would be that I know there are a number of tools that they're basically there's an industry that's spawning that is in response to the other industry that you mentioned that started about 2 years ago. Well, it started a lot time before that, but that really came to the key attention of everybody when ChatGPT came out, and all of the other tools, right? Just seems like every day there's a new AI-based tool that is going to solve all of my problems. There are several other tools that are probably just in the beginning that are starting to, learn how to detect fake video, right? How to detect fake audio. And it will be an arms race for the rest of time on how, on being able to detect, whether or not something actually happened, right? And it works in terms of, when we pull out data. So what we're often doing is we're either doing one of two things. We are pulling out data from a backup system, right? So this is a backup and recovery or a disaster recovery system whose sole purpose historically is to be able to recover your company when you get a ransomware attack, or you get a fire or a flood or a terrorist attack or something like that. That's the purpose of this disaster recovery system. Our purpose is but the problem is it's not stored in a way that's helpful to the legal profession. It's stored in a way that's helpful to that purpose. And so our goal is to pull data out of that and to say, look, we found this video that was stored, in our case, we tell you, it was stored in your backup system in April of 2018. And so you can know, like in that case, to go back to your question, you can know that that was a video that was created before all of this came to be, right? Or it was a video that was created contemporaneous with the event that was happening, and not a video that was created 5 minutes ago with an AI tool. So to answer your question, or to try to answer your question, what you're looking at are things like metadata, right? When was this created? Where? What was it created with? Some of this information can be faked, but like, for example, the way we're pulling data out, that cannot be faked, right? You can't go back and produce a backup that was that looks like it was produced 10 years ago, and put that video back into that backup, right? So that's where our expertise in technology really comes into play, is to pulling out that data from where it currently lies, and then giving it to you, and then and we can testify, because we do sometimes testify on behalf of clients, where we can testify as to that chain of custody, where this email, generally it's emails, right? Right now it's not mainly about videos, etc., right? But if it is videos, it's like surveillance footage, or like, I know right now we're pulling video off of a dash cam, right, because of an accident, right? And so all of that data is basically what we can testify is, here is, this data came from here, it followed this path to get to you, and we can testify, for example, that this data came directly off the dash cam in question, for example, right? This wasn't just a random file that was handed to us that was possibly generated somewhere.
Right.
That's a really long answer to your question.
It's really in-depth, actually. So one difference I picked from an AI generated anything, email or whatever, versus original is using the metadata, right? And is that all? So,
Well, the metadata and where it's coming from,
okay.
right? So if you're just handed a file, right? Like, you know, you're on TikTok or you're on Facebook and you see a video. Oh my goodness, here is this presidential candidate saying these horrible things. I can't believe they said these things. Is it real? Is it not? You have no idea. That's just a random video that you saw somewhere. But in an evidentiary situation, you would want to be able to testify as to what chain of custody, where did this video come from? What does the metadata show as to where the video came from? In our case, the type of data that we're retrieving for clients, we're not retrieving random files off of the internet. We're pulling data out of backup systems. We're pulling data directly out of hard drives, et cetera. And so we're able to testify as to the provenance of that data.
I think moving forward, that would be very important for admissibility of evidence, especially in the era of AI, I believe. Okay, so when reading your profile, I also came across something that caught my attention. Like, you explain the technology behind legal processes to lawyers in language they understand. Can you speak more about that, please?
Well, what I try, so I'll give you an example, right? So a lawyer issues, is given, an e-discovery request from opposing counsel, and they have to do this, and then they just hand that to the technical people, right? And they just go, here, do this. We need these things. We need all of the emails, right, from Curtis for the last 3 years that contain the words, Elvis, right, for the last 3 years. And then the process by which they pull those emails out is, I think, to most lawyers, a complete mystery, right? And so what I've just generally in my career, what I've specialized is in explaining technical things to non-technical people, or to really deeply technical things to less technical, or to people that don't participate in that part of it. And I guess one of the things that I spend much of my time explaining to lawyers on both sides of a case is that one of the things that you need to understand is that without assistance of a company like ours, if you have an e-discovery request and what the customer has is backups, right? So they've got a daily backup of their email system for the last 7 years. Maybe they're required by regulation to store all emails for 7 years. So they've got backups for the last 7 years. The thing that I would want most lawyers to understand is that, as I mentioned before, when data is stored for backup purposes, it is absolutely not stored for e-discovery purposes. And extracting the data out of a typical backup system for the purposes of e-discovery, let's just say you can very quickly get to an undue burden situation where the defense can simply say, look, Your Honor, you've asked for all the emails from, Curtis that use the word Elvis from the last 3 years. The backup system that we have, our technical people looked at it, and it's going to take us 2 years of 10 hours a day, to do this. This is an undue burden, Your Honor. And then they end up, and I don't think that that's good for either side. I don't think I think it's best when the actual evidence is presented. And I realize that there are other countries that don't do it this way, but in the U.S., right, you've got a discovery request, and it's not so much a request, it's a discovery demand, right? I guess what I'm just trying to say is to understand, and when I've got a whiteboard and things, I can definitely explain a little bit more technical, but the thing is 100% that a backup system is simply not designed to provide data the way the typical lawyer is going to want it to be provided, right? And it's going to take them a really, really long time. Now, the reason why I say it is that, S2 Data, where I happen to work, has they've written proprietary software to be able to do the backup systems. They have the backup software and they have the restore software, and they're basically the same. It's two sides of the same piece of software. What S2 Data did was they wrote a retrieval software, which is software that takes those backups and behaves the way a lawyer wants it to behave, and it can extract the data out in the way that a lawyer wants, way faster. And it's also done as a service, so it requires basically zero time on the part of the client. They just need to give us access to the data, so it can be, it's less expensive, it's much faster. And here's a really important thing: is that the chain of custody is documented, and and you can present to the judge, to the opposing counsel. You can present in a way that says, "Listen, we looked for the things that you asked us to look for, and we as a third party can say that this customer, we looked at all their backups. We looked for every email that Curtis sent with this word. This is like the magic word they're looking for, right? We didn't find any, right? It's a much more powerful statement to make when you can say, we use the same process we use at every client. We extracted all of the email that matched the parameters that you specified, and we didn't find any." Imagine how much more powerful that is from a legal standpoint for a defendant.
That's powerful. And the tool is readily available. Is it publicly accessible, or do you
it's a service. That we use the tool. We use the tool and provide it as a service. So you give us access to your backups either by sending us, we can do it on site. Obviously we work with some of the biggest household names that you're familiar with, but we can't, throw them around.
Yeah, right.
Right. But we have places where we have equipment on premises I can think of one very big financial organization where we have equipment because they do enough work, where we put on premises resident equipment ready to do the work, but we have to do the work, right? Because the software is written for our people, not for public use. And so we do it as a service. They just say, "Hey, we're looking for this is what we're looking for now. We're looking for, this is the time range. This is the phrasing. These are the data managers that we're looking for." And then we just provide that to them in the format that they're looking for.
Awesome. That's really amazing. I'm glad to hear that, actually. Never knew something like that existed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so for legal professionals who are working in maybe technical fields or legal cases that involve technicalities, do you advise that they get some sort of education on the technical concept or not?
So I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
The challenge will be in terms of what resources they can find. Because here's the problem. The problem is what we're talking about is the industry that I historically fall into is what we call the backup and recovery industry. It's for lack of a better phrase, it is the least sexy part of IT, right? It's not the part of IT that anybody wants to go into. And so there's not a lot of resources for people to understand this sort of very small part of IT. So there are some resources. They're not written. I'm not aware of any resources that are written for the legal mind. I know that we have some resources available on s2data.com, and they are definitely written with the legal mind. So that would be the best thing that I could offer them. But I'm not aware of any books, for example, any training courses that are written to understand or to help a lawyer understand this difficult part of the technical process.
Okay. So what are that, if they exist, what are the intersections between AI and the data industry, data and cyber recovery industry?
Again, I think that it's basically goes back to the same answer I gave at the beginning, which is in the world of electronic discovery, the biggest thing is, there's two really big parts. One is the sort of the heavy lifting, which is what we're doing, which is pulling the data out of these disparate systems they're often ancient systems. They're often systems that, that no one's touched in many years, right? So that's sort of the heavy lifting, and we're glad to do that. That's basically our main value add and role in the industry. But then also there is that filtering and processing that and that I think is where at least at this point, that's where the intersection of AI and discovery and forensics is in that, trying to find the nugget that you're looking for within a pile of data.
Are there ethical challenges?
I think there are, and I was just looking at, there were some recommendations from the ABA that have been proposed in terms of that you should be upfront about the fact that you are using an AI tool to do what you're doing. You should be upfront about that. And then there were some stuff that's more, I'd call it logistical. So, for example, they were saying that with a lawyer, if a lawyer is using a discovery tool and they're using AI to do a thing on behalf of a client, they can charge the client for the time they spend using the AI tool. They can't charge the client for the time they spend learning the AI tool, right? That was a recommendation from the ABA. But I think the main thing is, as long as you're being upfront about the fact that it's like, here is the process we followed. We pulled all of the data that produced this pile of data that is, typically we're looking at dozens of gigabytes, hundreds of gigabytes, maybe even many terabytes of data, right? A significant pile of data. We had this data that was this big. We pruned it down to this big using this tool. Here's the query that we provided against this tool. Here's all of the different queries that we talked, we gave to the AI tool, and this is what it produced. As long as you're, I think, upfront about that, and you're obviously not using any AI tools to produce evidence, right? Or to produce fake evidence, to create evidence. Produce is fine. Create is bad, right? So yeah, that would be unethical and not good.
Yeah, I can imagine. So moving forward, what do you see? I wanted to say, can you predict, but let me not use that word. What do you feel? What do you see as the future in the next 10 years between AI, specifically e-discovery, and law, and also data? The three.
Yeah, I do think that, when we look at, you asked about like the fake video thing, fake
Right.
video and fake audio. I mean, we could do fake emails. We could make fake emails 20 years ago. That was, that's easy peasy. You just type it out, right? The challenge with a fake email is creating one that has the metadata that matches the original system, right? That is really, really difficult, and potentially an AI tool could help do that. But again, the way we're pulling data out, I just don't see how they would be successful with that. But I can see over time, it's already becoming difficult right now. When you look at, like, if you look at specifically the American presidential contest, right?
Right.
Without getting political, I have seen videos on both sides that are clearly fake. right? I mean, some are clearly fake. Some are like, wow, this looks, and then you got to like do some research. It's like, no, that video did. It's already becoming difficult to determine between what's real and what's imaginary. Right. I think that problem would get way worse before it gets better, right? There will be and it will become a problem for the legal system because there will be a lot of fake videos, fake phone calls. We have this phone call, right? They have this.
Is it
this
robocalls?
Yeah, robocalls, fake. Well, yeah, robocalls are. That's more a problem in the cybersecurity industry. We already have this problem where, if you haven't heard this, where they are able to mimic your mother's voice, right? Yeah. And then your mother calls or mimic your voice, and you call your mother asking for some quick money, and they're able to, and they know just enough about you to fake your voice and your and by the way, this problem's worse for people like you and me that do a podcast, right? I have my own podcast, the Backup Wrap Up. Our voice, our image is everywhere. Whoa, right? And so we're a target. That's not so much I could see it being used as evidence in a lead, but you'd have to have a recording, right? Mainly what we're concerned about on the evidence side is when we use a recording or a video as evidence in a case, then the veracity of that video matters a lot. And I think that, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to get more and more difficult to, and it will become, I think maybe, if you go back to, to quote a famous songwriter, if I could turn back time, to 2 years ago, if you had a video of something, that was it. That was the proof, right?
Right.
Okay. I think we fast forward until we get the detection systems that are able to 100% identify. I think video and audio evidence is going to lower down. It's going to become lower in terms of evidentiary value. It's going to go down to the level of eyewitness testimony, right? Eyewitness testimony. It's kind of funny. Eyewitness testimony is the least reliable testimony, but yet, juries really like it, right? But I think video and audio is going to go down to the level of, okay, here's a video. Maybe it proves it. Maybe it doesn't. Again, our role will be able to say, like, if it's a lot of video and audio evidence comes from, if it's real evidence, it comes from an actual video system, right? Like a security camera, or it comes from a voice logging system that the company uses. Our role is that we can go in and we can say, listen, we pulled this video evidence directly from the video surveillance system, the audio logging system, and we can testify as to the path, right, and the chain of custody that video took, and then we can testify to its veracity. And that the difficulty will be when you get this random, right, this random video or random email that's just stored as a text, right? That I think the value of those will go way down.
So it's going to be, can you prove the metadata of this video? Else the value goes down to that of maybe an eyewitness. Oh,
wow. If you can't prove the provenance of that video, right, where it came from, and how you got it, right? And that would be, it is going to go way down. Yeah.
Awesome. I really enjoyed this. Do you have any closing thoughts? Any other thing to say before we close?
Well, I'll just say that we did at S2 Data, we put together an offering for people that happen to hear me on a podcast, and basically it's if you have some backups, right? A lot of people end up they have this like pile of tapes, and they don't know what's on them. They would like to get rid of them, or they maybe might want to use them in the case. And finding out what's on those tapes is sometimes quite difficult. The offer that we put out is that we'll basically look at one of them, tell you what's on the tape, and then let you decide. And so if that's something that's of interest to you, if you go to s2data.com/podcast offer, and then we can begin the process for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, W. Curtis Preston, for coming. I really enjoyed and learned a lot, and I'm so sure the listeners and viewers did as well. Thank you for coming. And
Thank you, Tolu.
You're welcome. And to the listeners and viewers, let's know what your comment or your reviews are in the comment section, or if you're listening to it on the audio platforms, give your reviews. And yeah, thank you so much. Until next time, take care and bye-bye.